You try to change the world like someone trying to move a mountain with their bare hands. You push, force, insist, pray, implore, watch the sky for signs, but none of it alters the essence of what you experience. And the reason is simple. You are fighting in the wrong dimension. Everything that appears on the outside is merely the belated shadow of something you, consciously or unconsciously, have assumed within. The error that sabotages you is not a lack of effort, nor a lack of luck, nor a lack of opportunity. The error is believing that external reality is the cause of your life. It is not. External reality is the effect. And you have been living like someone trying to correct the echo instead of transforming the voice that produces it. You look at what exists and react, and by reacting you confirm, strengthen, and recreate the same inner state that generated it. You say, "But I'm saying I want something else." Yes, with your mouth. But inside, what do you truly assume? What is the state you silently inhabit when no one sees? Because it is this, and only this, that creates your life. The law does not respond to discourse, nor to tears, nor to despair. The law responds to the invisible conviction you hold without realizing it. That's why so many believe the law doesn't work for them. It's not the law that fails. It's the person who insists on assuming misery while asking for abundance, assuming rejection while imploring for love, assuming impossibility while demanding miracles. The truth, however hard it may seem, is liberating. Your life is not against you, it is merely obeying you. The world is obedient, docile, moldable like warm clay, but you try to mold it with your hands when it only responds to the fire you ignite in your imagination. The only force capable of commanding reality is the inner state. And that state you choose. It doesn't matter what you've lived, what you've lost, what others have tried to make you believe. What matters is what you assume now, because now is the door between what you were and what you will be. To compel the law is not to fight against the visible, it is to deny its authority. It is to look at what exists and say, with the silent certainty of creators, "This may be before my eyes, but not before my consciousness." When you understand this, despair falls away. You stop begging for signs. You stop looking outward as if the world were a judge of your destiny. You begin to look inward and realize that everything is already there, just waiting for you to align with the version of yourself that already possesses what you desire. And it is precisely here that true power begins. Not in effort, but in conscious assumption. Not in the world, but within you. Because nothing, absolutely nothing, can resist someone who has assumed their end with conviction. This is how the law is compelled, not by the force of a shout, but by the force of being. And it all begins when you decide to abandon the tyranny of the senses. This is the first real step, and also the most challenging, because your eyes, your ears, your entire body have been trained since childhood to believe only in what they can touch. You have been conditioned to react to what you see, to worry about what you hear, to accept the visible as final truth. But none of this is law. It's just habit. And as long as you continue living guided by what your senses register, you will keep repeating the same cycles, the same limitations, the same old results. The external world is merely a reflection. Trying to change it is like trying to alter your image in a mirror by touching the glass. Real change happens when you change the face, not the reflection. When your senses say, "Nothing has changed," you believe it. And by believing, you confirm the old state, even if deep down you desire something new. That is why so many people feel stuck. They ask for transformation, but remain emotionally committed to the old reality, reacting to it as if it were absolute. To abandon the senses does not mean to deny the existence of what is before you. It means to deny its authority. It is to look at a circumstance that contradicts your desire and refuse to adopt it as definitive. It is to say to yourself, with serenity and firmness, "This is not the cause. This is merely the effect of what I used to be." And by doing so, you strip the physical world of the power that was never truly its own. True practice is not complication. It is discipline. It is to choose time and again to return to the desired state, regardless of external signs. It is to feel abundant when the bank account is low. It is to feel loved when the phone is silent. It is to feel healthy when the body still shows symptoms. This is not self-deception. It is spiritual authority. It is you assuming the role of creator, not victim of circumstances. Your senses will try to pull you back to the old state, because they have been trained to react, not to create. And you will need to hold them firmly, like someone holding the reins of a restless horse, until they learn to follow the inner command instead of the external scenario. When you abandon loyalty to the visible, something extraordinary happens. The world loses its power to affect you. It continues to exist, but it ceases to determine who you are. You cease to be a reactor and become one who assumes. And gradually, the external begins to bend to the internal, not because you forced the facts, but because you made it clear to them which state you chose. Reality has no choice when you remain faithful to the end. The world, however solid it may seem, is malleable before a consciousness that refuses to return to the old state. And here is the truth that few have the courage to live. Just one moment of profound decision, a moment in which you abandon what the senses dictate, is enough for the transition to begin invisibly. The rest is simply the inevitable consequence of the inner posture you sustain. The second movement occurs when you finally understand that imagination is not an escape, but the workshop where all reality is molded. Most people imagine by wishing, like someone observing something distant behind glass. They wish with intensity, but continue to perceive themselves as someone who does not yet possess. And as long as this "not yet" is part of their identity, life cannot deliver anything but more waiting. Desire points the direction, but it is assumption that creates the path. When you imagine as one who wishes, you reaffirm absence. When you imagine as one who assumes, you declare presence. And the law only responds to the assumed state, not to an emotional plea. The secret here is simple, yet profound. You need to enter the final scene, not as a spectator, but as the protagonist. It's not enough to visualize, it's necessary to inhabit. Feel the texture of the desired reality, the weight of the body that has already arrived where you wanted, the inner silence of one who no longer needs to ask for anything. This is the state that creates. Everything you can live internally as a fact, and not as a distant dream, becomes inevitable in the physical world. Imagination is not the place where you escape from reality. It is the place where you manufacture it, and that is why so many never see change. They continue to imagine from a place of lack, not fullness. When Neville said, "live in the end," he wasn't talking about a technique, but a way of being. It is you deciding that within yourself, the scene is already complete. It doesn't matter if the external world still presents absence, noise, delay, or contradiction. What matters is the inner stage. The one who lives the end within will inevitably see it without. The one who imagines as if it already is compels the world to obey. The one who assumes the final state without turning back becomes an unstoppable force. But for this, you need to abandon the temptation to view imagination as a fleeting exercise. It's not something you do for 5 minutes. It's a state you choose to inhabit throughout the day. It is returning to it whenever you realize you've fallen into the old self. It is correcting your inner course with the same naturalness with which someone straightens their posture when they realize they are slouched. It's not about momentary intensity, but silent constancy. Imagination sustained with conviction is the greatest power that exists, and that's why so few use it. It demands responsibility. It demands spiritual maturity to admit that if everything originates within, then everything you experience today is your own doing, consciously or unconsciously. When you finally accept that imagination is the only place where reality is decided, something ignites within you. You stop looking at the world as a judge and start seeing it as an employee. It doesn't command, it obeys. And whom does it obey? The image you choose to faithfully sustain. From then on, wishing loses its power, assuming becomes natural, and life, once slow and resistant, begins to move at your inner command. The third movement reveals itself when you understand that nothing in creation surpasses the power of silent persistence. Most people can even imagine the desired end, They can even feel the assumed reality for a few moments. But they soon abandon everything at the first sign of external contradiction. It's like planting a seed and pulling it out of the soil every day to check if it's growing. There is no harvest for one who does not sustain the root. The law does not respond to momentary enthusiasm, it responds to constancy. The state you maintain, not the one you visit, is what materializes. To persist is not physical effort, nor is it emotional tension. To persist is to remain internally faithful to the assumed state, even when nothing on the outside seems to cooperate. It is to return, countless times, to the feeling of the end, until that feeling becomes more familiar than the old self. It is to sustain a silent, almost invisible certainty, like someone carrying a powerful secret that no one can steal. Persistence is not noise, it is direction. It is not anxiety, it is mastery. The person who persists does not ask, "When will it happen?" because they already know that the physical world is slow and merely carries out what has already been decreed in the invisible. This is the point where many sabotage themselves. They believe that a lack of immediate change is a sign that they have failed, when in reality, the delay is merely the nature of the dense world. Imagination creates instantly. Matter takes time to reorganize. And this interval, this space between the assumed state and the manifestation, is precisely the test that separates the conscious creator from the reactive one. Whoever gives up too soon reaffirms the old state and restarts the cycle. Whoever perseveres wins. Persistence does not demand perfection, it demands return. Every time your mind escapes into doubt, you don't need to fight with it. Just reposition yourself in the final state. Every time your senses scream that nothing is changing, don't argue with them. Just remember that they are servants, not masters. To persist is to place the end as a fixed point of consciousness, like the North Star that does not move, even when the wind tries to push you away from it. It is to live internally, as one who already knows the outcome, even if the world has not yet received the memo. When you master this gentle persistence, something profound happens. Reality begins to yield. Small events emerge, doors open, paths align, people appear, not as a miracle but as a consequence of your inner steadfastness. Nothing is coincidental. Nothing is luck. It is the law, responding to the constancy of the state you did not abandon. Persistence is the highest form of faith, because it does not depend on emotion, it depends on decision. A decision so firm, so absolute, that the world simply cannot ignore it. When you remain, reality has no choice. It obeys. The fourth movement begins when you understand that the appearance of things is merely a temporary mask, and that if you react to it, you lose dominion over your own creation. When you assume a new inner state, the old reality begins to unravel. This unraveling, however, is not always elegant. Sometimes it seems like chaos, loss, confusion, doors closing, people distancing themselves, opportunities evaporating. Many at this point believe that everything has gotten worse and abandon precisely the state that was beginning to solidify. It is at this instant that most lose the manifestation. They interpret the collapse as failure when it is merely transition. You need to understand that every old reality must die for the new one to exist. There is no renewal without demolition. That which does not align with the final state needs to get out of the way, and this process is not always smooth for the senses. But for the consciousness that knows what it is doing, none of this matters. The conscious creator does not react to apparent chaos. They recognize it as movement. It's like someone renovating a house. Before beauty comes the dust. Before the new floor comes the noise. Before the perfect structure comes the crash of walls falling. Only those who don't understand the process despair when the old begins to crumble. Detaching from appearances is an act of inner authority. It means looking at the scenario that contradicts your desire and remaining in the desired end without wavering. It means not allowing the fear of the moment to determine the state you assume. Many confuse this with passivity, but it is precisely the opposite. It is mastery. It is you choosing not to surrender your power to circumstances. When you react emotionally to what you see, you confirm it as true and reinforce the state you no longer desire. When you observe without being altered, you keep alive the vibration of the final state. The physical world is slow, and the bridge of events rarely follows human logic. Sometimes God reorganizes your life by breaking things you believe to be essential. Sometimes, what seems like a loss is merely the necessary detour to the end you have assumed. Sometimes the road needs to appear worse before revealing where it was leading you. The old identity always resists when it is dying, and this resistance manifests as external turbulence. But you cannot allow this turbulence to pull you away from the state you have chosen. When you master detachment from appearances, you finally achieve spiritual stability. Nothing throws you off balance. Nothing convinces you that the assumed state is false. Nothing makes you doubt what you have already decreed within yourself. And little by little, what seemed like chaos aligns. The pieces move, the paths open. The old disappears, the new emerges. Not because of luck, but because you knew how to remain steadfast while everything reorganized itself. Reality changes when you stop being impressed by it. From then on, it is the world that begins to react to you, and not the other way around. The fifth movement occurs when you finally understand that nothing manifests before it is felt. This is the point where many stumble, because they have learned to wait to feel only afterwards. Waiting for money to feel prosperity, waiting for love to feel love, waiting for healing to feel health. But the law works in reverse. First you feel, then you see. Feeling is the invisible mold into which reality pours itself. Feeling is the magnetic field that draws manifestation into the physical plane. Without it, nothing takes root, nothing gains stable form. You can repeat affirmations, visualize scenes, study techniques, but if you cannot feel the desired reality as something true within yourself, the creation remains incomplete. Feeling is not fleeting emotion, it is identity. It is the way you perceive yourself before any evidence appears. It is the inner tone you choose to sustain, even when everything around denies that tone. Feeling the end is the most powerful act that exists, because it erases the distance between you and what you desire. Every time you feel as if it already is, you dissolve the when and the how that kept you trapped in time. Creation does not happen in the future, it happens in the now. And the now only changes when your feeling changes. Therefore, feeling is the true way to compel the law, not through external imposition, but through internal magnetism. This is where resistance arises. The human mind has been conditioned to react only to the visible, and that is why it protests when you try to feel something that the senses do not yet confirm. It says, but it's not happening, and you must respond silently, it is happening within me, and that is enough. When you sustain this feeling, something extraordinary begins to occur. Your imagination ceases to be an exercise and becomes a place where you live. Each return to the final state reinforces the vibration until it becomes more real to you than your current physical experience. At this point, manifestation is not just probable, it is inevitable. The world has no choice when your feeling has already concluded the story, and you will notice this in your body, in your breath, in your posture. The person who feels the end carries no anxiety. They do not beg for signs, they do not seek confirmation, they know. And this silent certainty is what moves mountains. When you feel deeply, the universe has no alternative but to reorganize everything around you to correspond to the state you have assumed. It is as if the world were waiting only for you to set the inner tone so that it can then harmonize the external melody. To feel is to create. To feel is to command. To feel is to decree the end before any evidence appears. There is no greater force. There is no superior technique. When you feel as if it already is, you no longer ask for changes. You command them. And reality, obedient as it has always been, begins to respond not to your desires, but to your being. When you finally understand this, you realize that nothing has been out of your reach. Everything has always waited for just one thing, for you to feel like someone who already possesses what you have chosen to live. From that moment on, manifestation ceases to be a possibility and becomes merely a matter of time. And now that you have traversed each principle, you need to understand what all of this truly means. There is nothing outside of you creating your life. There never was. There never will be. The world simply follows impeccably the state you maintain in silence. You have spent years trying to move external pieces, trying to convince people, trying to fight against circumstances, when the only force that has always determined everything was what you assumed internally. The time has come to abandon this posture of a spiritual beggar, of someone who implores for signs, who asks the universe for crumbs, who waits for something out there to decide the course of their path. That time is over. From now on, you no longer react to the visible. You command through the invisible. You do not ask for life to change. You assume the change within yourself. You do not wait to feel after the manifestation. You feel before like someone who knows it already is. The conscious creator does not negotiate with appearances, does not beg for confirmations, does not doubt what they have decreed in the silence of imagination. They know that reality is obedient, docile and inevitable before a state assumed with conviction. They understand that every circumstance, every person, every event, every detail is merely a piece being rearranged to manifest what they have already chosen to be. And let this be imprinted within you. The law does not respond to despair. It responds to certainty. It does not respond to fear. It responds to the state. It does not respond to the noise of the mind. It responds to the deep tone of sustained imagination. You are not here to observe life. You are here to create it. And creating is not an effort. It is a decision. A silent, firm, continuous decision, which you renew at every instant you choose the end instead of the appearance, conviction instead of doubt, inner authority instead of emotional reaction. Stop searching outside for what can only be assumed within. Stop chasing what should come to you. Stop waiting for permission. The law is already ready to serve you, but it can only deliver what you sustain as truth. So from this moment on, walk as one who has already arrived, feel as one who already has, live as one who already is. Because nothing in the universe can resist the consciousness that rises and declares, I assume. The entire reality bows before this statement. And when it bows, everything that seemed distant becomes inevitable. Everything is ready for you, provided you are ready to assume. Before any technique, before any spiritual or mental practice, there is a principle that needs to be understood. Consciousness is the only reality. Everything you see, touch, and call life is merely a projection of what already exists within you. This truth is as ancient as humanity itself, yet few have the courage to live it. Most believe the opposite, that the external world shapes the internal. But I tell you, it is the internal that commands the external. It is the invisible that governs the visible. When I speak of the chair technique, I am not referring to a simple exercise in relaxation or visualization. I speak of an act of conscious creation, a return to the point where one remembers they are the sole creator of their reality. The chair is merely a symbol, a portal between two worlds, the world of appearances and the world of causes. When you sit in it, you are declaring to your mind, silence. The world outside has no power over me. From this moment on, I decree what is. Understand, my friend, it is not time that creates, nor effort, nor logic. It is the state of consciousness. Everything you possess, everything you experience, good or bad, is the result of the state you chose to remain in. Most people change their desires, but remain trapped in the same inner state of lack, fear, or doubt. That is why nothing changes. The chair technique is the means by which one learns to change their state. Closing your eyes is not escaping the world, it is penetrating true reality. Because the world of the senses is merely a shadow, a copy of what has been assumed in the invisible. When you withdraw into silence, you leave the stage of illusion and return to the author's room, where every scene can be rewritten. It is there, in that instant of absolute stillness, that the power of imagination begins to act. In the chair technique, there are no requests, no pleas. There is certainty. The ordinary person kneels and implores God for something. The awakened person sits and becomes what they desire. That is the difference between the servant and the creator. One waits, the other assumes. That is why I call this practice sacred, because it teaches one to remember their divine origin. When you sit with purpose, relax the body, and calm the mind, you are not merely meditating, you are returning to the throne of creation. There, in the silence of the mind and the peace of the body, you begin to govern the invisible with authority. And that which governs the invisible inevitably governs the visible. Therefore, when you sit to practice the chair technique, do not make it a ritual of hope, but an act of power. Because in that instant, the Creator and the creation become one, and everything assumed there in that small inner throne will become flesh, form, and fact before your eyes. The first step of the chair technique is to understand what it means to be truly still. Most believe it is simply about stopping the body, but it is much more than that. Physical stillness is only the beginning. True silence is that of the mind. While the body rests, thoughts still try to race, resolve, control. It is necessary then to command the mind to rest, as if saying, "Be still, I am in command now." In that instant, one ceases to be swept away by facts and returns to the center of power, where everything originates. The technique begins when the body finds a comfortable position, usually seated in a chair, with eyes closed and hands resting on the lap. This simple gesture has a profound symbolic meaning. It represents the surrender of resistance. It is the act of giving up the struggle and recognizing that power lies not in effort, but in consciousness. The body relaxes, and with it, the world loses its grip. Because when one ceases external movement, they finally hear the sound of the invisible, the sound of one's own being, which creates without words. In this state, time dissolves. There is no longer past or future, only the now, and it is in the now that all realities coexist. With each calm breath, the old self begins to disappear. The worried person, the person in lack, the person who waits, all fall silent. What remains is pure presence, free of history, free of name. It is at this point that imagination becomes active and obedient, because while the mind is full of noise, it does not create, it merely repeats. But when silence settles, imagination reclaims its throne. Stillness, therefore, is not an emptiness but a preparation. It is the space where the new state can be born. The body is still, but consciousness begins to move, not toward something, but within something. You begin to feel that you are already in the desired place, that you already possess what once seemed distant. There is no effort, only presence. The secret is not to force images, but to allow the new reality to reveal itself naturally, like a lucid dream. When this happens, the feeling of already being begins to grow within you, until it becomes more real than the world outside. It is at this point that the first miracle occurs. The old state dissolves, and a new one is assumed. No sound is heard, no word is spoken, but the entire universe responds. Because the external world is merely a mirror, and the mirror only reflects what is placed before it. One who has learned to sit in silence and assume a new inner state masters the mirror of life. They no longer react to reflections, they decide what will be reflected. The chair technique then begins with this simple act of stopping. It seems small, but it is the most powerful of all. Because while the world rushes in search of answers, the Creator sits and remembers, everything I need already exists within me. And when this certainty is born, the impossible begins to move toward you, silently, obeying the new identity that was assumed on the throne of consciousness. The second step of the chair technique is to vividly assume the desired state. Here it is not about imagining something you wish to achieve, but about feeling something you already are. The mistake many make is to imagine from the outside, like spectators of a distant dream. But creative imagination demands involvement. You cannot observe the desire, you must inhabit it. The difference is subtle, but it transforms everything. When you imagine having, you are still separate from it. When you assume being, the entire universe begins to reorganize itself to reflect this new being. Upon closing your eyes and resting your body, consciousness needs to be led into a new state, not with words, but with feeling. If the desire is prosperity, feel the relief of someone who is already free from want. If it is health, feel the strength and lightness of a healed body. If it is love, feel the tenderness of someone who is already loved and secure. It is not about creating a fantasy, but about donning a feeling until it becomes natural. That is the key. What is felt as real in imagination becomes real in the physical world, because there is no difference between the two, only degrees of expression. While you are in the chair, do not think about how it will come. That is the domain of the world of appearances, not of creative consciousness. The how belongs to the invisible, and it is infinitely wiser than any human calculation. Your role is not to plan the route, but to sustain the destination. Maintain the feeling firmly until it replaces the old identity. From that point on, you are no longer trying to manifest, but living the state of being. And being is the cause of everything that manifests. In this state, time bends. The future ceases to exist as something distant and becomes the expanded present. The heart slows, the mind quiets, and the body begins to react as if what was assumed is already happening. This is the inner proof. The body responds to the mind and the mind responds to consciousness. It is a closed circuit of creation. When the feeling is true, there is no doubt, no effort. There is certainty. And it is this silent certainty that gives orders to the world. When the chair becomes the throne of your imagination, you speak without words. The universe understands what was decreed in feeling, and it begins to move people, events, and circumstances without noise, without warning. Everything adjusts in perfect synchronicity to sustain the reality that was assumed. But it is important to remember, feeling is not forced. It is cultivated gently. The more you surrender, the more natural it becomes. And when the new state becomes natural, the old one loses its power. The awakened person understands that creation is not a struggle, it is a remembrance. They do not try to bring the desire to themselves. They merely return to the consciousness of already being. Therefore, when practicing the chair technique, immerse yourself completely in the being you wish to express. Feel the weight of the new identity, breathe within it, and do not doubt, because in that instant, even if your senses do not yet show it, the creation has already been completed. The invisible is already moving, and sooner or later, the visible will be compelled to obey. The third step of the chair technique is to feel the emotion corresponding to the desired state. Herein lies the true seal of creation. Without emotion, the image is merely a cold shadow, an empty thought that lacks the power to take form. Emotion is the fire that gives life to the image. It is the divine touch that transforms imagination into reality. When you feel something deeply, you are imprinting that vibration upon the invisible field that sustains the universe. Everything that exists was once a feeling sustained with conviction. While you are seated in silence and with your body at peace, begin to awaken the feeling of what you desire. Do not think about it. Feel it. Imagine, for example, the joy of having received what you always wanted. Perceive the relief that comes when something that once seemed distant is now part of you. Feel your body react. Your chest opens. Your breath becomes light. Your heart vibrates in peace. This emotion is the inner evidence that the new state has been accepted by the subconscious mind. And what is accepted in the subconscious becomes destiny. But there is something even deeper. This emotion does not need to be forced. It arises when the mind ceases to doubt. When you truly believe that you already are, the body responds naturally. The smile emerges effortlessly. Serenity takes the place of haste. And in that instant, the invisible moves. Because the universe is sensitive to your inner vibration, it does not react to your words, but to what you feel to be true. Therefore, never try to use the chair technique as a means to escape your current reality. It is not an escape, it is a replacement. You do not deny what exists, you merely choose to feel something more true, more aligned with what you wish to manifest. And as this new feeling becomes natural, the old reality begins to disappear, like a shadow dissipating before the light. You can imagine, for example, someone congratulating you, a friend embracing you, a message arriving, a feeling of accomplishment. But do not worry about the details. The essential thing is what you feel in your heart. Feeling is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the secret code that the universe understands. While you remain in the chair, The emotion should be so authentic that for a brief instant, you forget you are imagining. Everything becomes real. The body reacts, the heart believes, and the invisible world receives the command. At this point, there is no difference between imagination and reality. Both become one. And this is what few understand. It is not desire itself that manifests, but the feeling of having already fulfilled it. When one learns to master their emotions, they learn to master creation. Because every emotion is a seed, and the world is merely the garden that blossoms according to what was planted within. So, during the chair technique, do not seek to imagine with the mind, create with the heart. Feel with intensity, but in peace, because true power does not shout, it vibrates silently. And this silent vibration, sustained with faith, is what moves mountains, changes destinies, and transforms the invisible into palpable reality. The fourth step of the chair technique is silent persistence, the faith that does not depend on signs or external confirmations. This is where many give up, because the visible world tries to deny what was created in the invisible. The person opens their eyes, sees the same situation, and thinks that nothing has changed. But the awakened person understands that manifestation does not begin with the eyes. It begins with consciousness. What was assumed internally is already in motion, even if the world still appears the same. It is at this point that true faith is proven. Silent persistence is the ability to remain in the new state, even when everything around still echoes the old. It is not returning to the old self, merely because the senses do not confirm what was imagined. It is keeping the feeling alive, even if the world says no. This is what distinguishes the creator from the dreamer. The dreamer imagines for a moment and soon doubts. The creator imagines and persists because they know that external reality is merely a delayed reflection of an internal cause already planted. When you rise from the chair after the practice, do not leave the new state there. Carry it with you. Walk, speak, think, and react as someone who already lives what they have assumed. This is practical faith. You do not need to tell anyone. Silence is your shield. Each time doubt tries to arise, return briefly to the feeling of certainty you experienced during the technique. Relive the feeling, even if for only seconds, and it will strengthen. Just as a seed grows unseen, your new reality matures in the invisible, merely awaiting the moment to appear. Persistence is what gives form to creation, because the universe responds to the constancy of the state, not to momentary intensity. It is no use feeling deeply once and then returning to doubt. Consciousness creates through the habit of being, not through fleeting emotion. It is necessary to sustain the new state until it becomes natural, and when it becomes natural, it manifests. At this point, patience ceases to be waiting and becomes conviction. You no longer await the result. You simply know it will come, like the dawn that inevitably follows the night. And it is in this quiet knowing that power operates. One who has learned to remain silent in the face of appearances becomes master of their own destiny. They are not swayed by circumstances, because they know that circumstances are merely obedient shadows of an inner state. The chair technique, therefore, teaches the art of persistence. The body rises, but the state remains. You can walk the streets, deal with the world, work, converse, but inwardly you remain still in the certainty of what has already been achieved. Nothing external has enough power to pull you from that inner throne, because the creation has already been completed. And that is why the results inevitably appear. Not because you asked, but because you persisted. Not because you implored, but because you assumed. Persisting in silence is the purest proof of faith. It is declaring without words, it is already mine. And the universe, obedient, responds to this conviction with synchronicities, encounters, opportunities, everything conspiring to give form to what was sustained within. The fifth step of the chair technique is voluntary forgetting, the final act of surrender. After feeling, assuming, and sustaining the new state, the moment comes to completely let go. It is not giving up, it is trusting. It is the point where consciousness stops trying to control the process and simply rests in the certainty that everything is already done. When you rise from the chair, you leave the old self there and go out into the world as one who has already received what they asked for. That is the difference between the one who believes and the one who doubts. One lives in peace, the other in waiting. Voluntary forgetting is the supreme proof of faith because it shows that you are no longer attached to the form, but to the conviction. What was created within does not need to be watched, remembered, or pushed. Just as the seed cast into the earth does not need your anxiety to grow, the desire assumed in consciousness will germinate in its perfect time. While the ordinary person asks, when will it happen? The awakened person lives as if it has already happened, and this naturalness is what accelerates the invisible. Upon leaving the chair, do not carry the weight of expectation. Expectation is a mask of fear. Replace it with silent gratitude. Walk with serenity, as one who knows that the world is already adjusting to reflect your new identity. Everything around you will begin to move in accordance with the state you inhabited. People will change their attitudes, doors will open, coincidences will arise. But you do not need to force anything, because the work has already been done on the highest plane, the plane of sustained imagination. Voluntary forgetting is the most divine gesture a creator can make, for it is then that the ego quiets. It is the moment when one ceases to interfere and allows the spirit to act. When you stop looking for signs and simply go on with life, the invisible finds space to act. Anxiety blocks the flow, rest releases it. The universe does not respond to haste, it responds to certainty. And there is something even deeper in this. By forgetting the desire, you do not lose it, you become it. There are no longer two, the one who desires and the desired. There is only being. And when being is complete, manifestation is inevitable. There is no resistance, no doubt, no effort. Only the perfect correspondence between the inner and the outer. Therefore, each time you practice the chair technique, end with this conscious surrender. Breathe deeply, feel the peace of one who has already created, and rise in silence. Do not look for signs. Do not seek proof. Live as if the work is already completed because it is. The invisible has already moved, and the visible will merely follow. This forgetting is the Creator's rest. It is the point where faith transforms into absolute power. Because one who has learned to let go has learned to create effortlessly, and one who creates effortlessly is free, for they have discovered the secret that was always within them. Everything assumed with feeling and surrendered with confidence must, without exception, become reality. Everything that exists begins and ends within consciousness. The chair technique is merely the mirror that reminds you of this. When you sit in silence and close your eyes, you are not practicing just any meditation. You are returning to your true place of power. In that instant, the body rests, but the spirit takes command. The mind quiets, and the I Am awakens. It is there, in that silence charged with presence, that creation happens. You do not need luck nor ideal circumstances. All you need is your own conviction. When you imagine and feel something as real, the entire universe reorganizes itself to confirm this truth. There are no exceptions. Every person, every situation, every coincidence is merely a piece moved by your sustained assumption. The world is obedient. It can only reflect the state you inhabit. Therefore, the chair technique is not about desiring, but about remembering. Remembering that power is not outside, nor in the future, nor in others. It is within now. While many rush after external changes, the Creator closes their eyes and creates within themselves. And when they open their eyes, the world has already begun to bow before the new state they assumed. The secret is simple, but it demands courage. Stop fighting against appearances and choose to remain in the inner truth. When you sit, you silence the world. When you imagine, you recreate the universe. When you feel, you give form to the invisible. And when you rise, you leave the rest to the law because it never fails. From today on, abandon the habit of asking, waiting, or doubting. Instead, command in silence. Assume the desired state as one who puts on new clothing, and do not abandon it until it becomes natural. Because everything that is natural to consciousness becomes inevitable in matter. So each time you sit to practice the chair technique, remember, you're not trying to change the world. You are changing the center from which the world is created. And when that center changes, the entire universe obeys. Sit as one who knows, feel as one who already is, and rise as one who has already triumphed. The invisible has already heard you. The rest is merely time fulfilling what your faith has decreed. You want to learn to speak to money, but not like someone who begs, pleads, or tries to manipulate it. You want to learn to speak like someone who awakens a silent power that has always been within you. Money, in its deepest form, is neither paper nor numbers. It is a flow of energy that condenses into matter when it encounters a consciousness ready to sustain it. It has no morals, no loyalty. It simply responds. If you fear it, it becomes a shadow. If you idolize it, it escapes. If you recognize it as part of your own inner creation, it bows and returns. This is because the true language of money is not made of phrases, but of vibrations, and every vibration arises from the inner state you inhabit now. Most people never realize this. They grow up hearing phrases about sacrifice, about earning money with sweat, about being lucky or being chosen. These beliefs shape how they speak to money, and money simply obeys. It doesn't argue when you say, "I don't have," and it hears, "Stay away from me." When you say, "This is difficult," it hears, "Remain scarce." There are no morals, just a response. The universe doesn't understand pleading, it understands command. And command is not shouting or arrogance, it is the serenity of one who knows. Speaking to money, then, is not an empty, mystical practice, but an exercise in internal repositioning. It is abandoning the role of beggar and assuming the role of creator. It is ceasing to describe scarcity and beginning to emit, with feeling and conviction, the frequency of possession. Therefore, what I will teach you is neither a trick nor a mantra. It is a way of existing. You will learn to treat money as an extension of your consciousness and to call it not to come, because it already exists, but to align with you. And here is the secret. It doesn't matter how much you have today or how you got here. Only the state you currently maintain matters, because money doesn't come from the world, it comes from the invisible you silently nurture. When you speak to it correctly, with calm authority, with respect and without anxiety, you change the point of emission, and the point of emission changes the flow. This is the difference between those who live asking and those who live commanding. And this is what you will begin to learn now. The first step is to change the tone of your inner voice, because it is there, in the silence of the mind, that you emit the commands that shape your financial reality. You can study about money, work for money, chase after it your whole life, but if the voice speaking within you keeps saying, "I don't have," "It's difficult," "I can't," then that is the vibration money obeys. It doesn't respond to physical action, but to the field you maintain in the invisible. And as long as this field vibrates scarcity, it will interpret that as a command to stay away. Money is obedient energy. It has no morals. It makes no judgments. It merely reflects. When you say, "I need money," you might think you are expressing a legitimate desire, but energetically, you are affirming lack. "I need" is the cry of one who still believes something is beyond their reach. The universe does not recognize pleading, it recognizes certainty. Money comes not to those who desire it, but to those who claim it. And claiming is not imagining that it will come one day. It is speaking and feeling as if you already have it. The first transformation, therefore, is internal. It is the change in the tone of the inner voice that commands reality. You must stop talking to money as if it were a force that ignores you and start talking to it as one would to a friend who always responds, but only on the same frequency. Try observing your thoughts throughout the day. How often do you complain, compare, criticize, or fear money? Each of these phrases is a prayer, and each prayer is a vibratory command. You may not realize it, but you are constantly telling money what to do. When you worry, you say, "Stay unstable." When you blame it for problems, you say, "Become heavy." When you think it only comes with effort, you command, "Come with pain." What you call a financial belief is nothing more than the tone of your inner voice. And the universe is literal. It doesn't translate hidden intentions. It obeys the strongest vibration you maintain. True discipline, therefore, is not mechanically repeating positive phrases, but re-educating the state that speaks within you. It's no use saying I am prosperous while vibrating fear. Money doesn't understand words, it understands feeling. The inner voice needs to be a mix of serenity and authority. Serenity because one who has doesn't need to prove. Authority because one who is the source doesn't ask, but commands. When you speak to money in this way, the sound changes even in silence. You stop emitting noise and start emitting direction. You are not trying to convince money to come. You are reminding it where it belongs. It is attracted by order, not by chaos. And order arises from a mind that already sees itself as complete. This is why so many struggle and few prosper, because struggle is a vibration of resistance, while the consciousness of possession is a field of attraction. It's not about denying reality, but about refusing the illusion of scarcity as authority. The inner voice needs to become the voice of one who already has. It is this voice that creates the field money recognizes as home. So when the mind wants to repeat the old pattern, it's difficult, it won't work, I don't have. Silence it and say something else, but with true feeling. Money recognizes me. It comes because it is my extension. It serves me because I command it in harmony. Repeat until you feel peace. Peace is the sign that the command has been received. It is at this point that the invisible begins to move. The inner voice is the Creator's command throne, and when it speaks with clarity and conviction, the visible world has no choice but to obey. The second step is to create a relationship of respect with money, because nothing you despise remains, and nothing you idolize obeys you. Most people live oscillating between these two extremes, contempt and idolatry. They despise it when they see it run out, when they associate it with greed, when they blame it for their pains, and they idolize it when they receive it, treating it as something too sacred, almost inaccessible. Both behaviors are born from the same root, fear. And fear, however much it tries to disguise itself as prudence, is a silent denial of abundance itself. You need to understand that money is like a mirror. It reflects exactly how it is treated. If you treat it as something that comes and goes without warning, it will remain unstable. If you treat it as something dirty, laden with guilt, it will avoid you. But if you treat it as an ally, neutral, obedient, available, it approaches and stays. True respect is not adoration, it is balance. It is recognizing its value without bowing to it. It is holding a bill and seeing in it not power, but energy at your service. Before each transaction, observe your attitude. When you pay a bill, do you feel loss or fluidity? When someone talks about money, do you contract or expand? These reactions reveal the kind of field you maintain. Money is not listening to what you say aloud, but to what you feel when dealing with it. And feeling is the language by which it understands whether it is being welcomed or rejected. The one who spends with guilt or fear is saying, "Go away and don't come back." The one who spends with gratitude and awareness says, "Go and return multiplied." Respect for money is also expressed in how you use it. There are those who disperse it unconsciously, buying to fill voids, accumulating to hide insecurities. Both forget that money was not made to be kept as a prisoner, but to circulate like living blood. To respect money is to allow it to fulfill its purpose of exchange and expansion. Bless it before using it, not with mystical words, but with clear intention. When handing over a bill, visualize, "Go and return multiplied, bringing harmony to all where you pass." This is a silent but powerful conversation. It is the difference between an expense and a vibrational investment. You can transform every financial act into a ritual of alignment, without needing candles, amulets, or superstition. Just presence. Respect is not in the gesture, but in the consciousness. The unconscious spender becomes poor because they operate on autopilot. The deliberate creator prospers because they transform every movement into direction. When they pay, they are sending a seed. When they receive, they are welcoming the fruit. They understand that money is a neutral force that merely amplifies the state of whoever touches it. To respect money is also to respect yourself. It is not diminishing your own worth by accepting less than you know you deserve, nor selling time and energy out of fear of scarcity. Each time you submit out of despair, The universe understands that your vibration is one of servitude. But when you position yourself with dignity, without arrogance, the field changes. Money senses when there is coherence. It is not attracted by intense desire, but by inner stability. It's like an electrical current, it needs a clean circuit to flow. From now on, before complaining, pause. Before spending, bless. Before desiring, acknowledge. Say in silence, "Money is my ally, not my master. It serves me because I respect it." And notice what happens when this attitude becomes constant. Money begins to circulate in a different way, lighter, more predictable, more frequent, because all energy treated with consciousness organizes itself. And money, like any energy, flourishes where it finds order and gratitude. The third step is to speak to money in silence, because it is in silence that the deepest commands are issued. When you try to shout at the universe, nothing happens. The shout arises from doubt, and doubt is noise. Money doesn't respond to noise. It responds to stable vibration. Therefore, you must learn to speak to it without sound, without haste, without effort. The force that moves the invisible is discreet, yet precise. It acts when the human mind stops asking and the spirit begins to affirm. Silence is the temple where the true command is heard. Close your eyes. Breathe. Feel your body relax. Now imagine money not as bills or numbers, but as a golden current of energy flowing around you, circulating freely. This current is alive. It perceives your frequency and responds to your inner voice. Don't say anything yet. Just observe how it reacts to your state. If you feel anxiety, it distances itself. If you feel calm and power, it approaches. Money understands feeling before words. So, before speaking to it, enter the right state, the state of one who already has. Now speak to it within yourself. You are pure energy. You recognize me because I am the source from which you flow. Circulate freely and return multiplied. There is no need to repeat many times, nor to create elaborate rituals. Just feel what you say. The word is only magical when it is felt. Money does not obey the number of repetitions, but the coherence between what you say and what you vibrate. When there is coherence, the invisible bows. When there is contradiction, the command dissolves. This practice is not fantasy, it is vibrational training. You are teaching the mind to emit clear instructions, free from fear. You are reprogramming the relationship between you and the flow. Money is like a sensitive animal. It perceives subtle intentions. If it senses you want it to escape pain, it hesitates. If it perceives you call it to expand, it trusts. Therefore, before any command, cleanse the feeling. Replace need with gratitude, urgency with certainty, fear with tranquility. Speaking to money in silence is an act of dominance, not of desire. You are not trying to convince the universe. You are reminding it of your identity as a creator. Each aligned thought is a command. Each coherent emotion is a confirmation. When the inner field is stable, money responds almost immediately, not by magic, but by correspondence. The invisible organizes itself according to the clarity of the emitter. Practice this every day, even for a few minutes. Not like someone performing a technique, but like someone conversing with an ally. Close your eyes and visualize money flowing through different paths. Opportunities, people, ideas, unexpected rewards, all converging towards you. See this energy approaching and feel it stabilizing around you as if it were returning home. Remain in this feeling until desire transforms into certainty. Certainty is the seal that concludes the command. Then forget about it. Release control. Don't watch the clock. Don't check for results. Money is moving even if you don't see it. When you speak to it correctly, the return is inevitable. Anxiety is doubt disguised as attention, and doubt is the only noise the universe recognizes as cancel command. Therefore, speak once, feel deeply, and be silent. The silence after the command is the most powerful point in the process. It is in this interval that the invisible acts. You don't need to insist. You need to trust. Money understands when it has been called by someone who knows, and when that certainty is real, it returns. It always returns. The fourth step is to sustain the state, even when everything around seems to contradict what you have affirmed. This is the part where most people give up, because they still believe that visible reality has more authority than the invisible. But I tell you, the invisible is the cause, and the visible is merely the echo. When you command something internally, the external world moves to reflect this new vibration. But between the command and the manifestation, there is an interval, a period of apparent silence, which is actually the time of reorganization. If you doubt during this interval, the echo distorts. If you maintain the state, the reflection solidifies. Sustaining the state is remaining true to the inner vision when circumstances try to convince you otherwise. It is looking at an empty balance and feeling abundance. It is hearing no and continuing to vibrate yes. This is not self-deception, it is mastery. The Creator does not describe what they see, they sustain what they know. While the ordinary person reacts to facts, the conscious person sustains the cause. Money was never absence, it is energy in transit. And all energy in transit needs a stable consciousness to settle. The human mind has been trained to believe what the eyes show. But the Creator learns to see with feeling. When the world shouts, "It's over," they respond in silence. Something greater is coming. This internal, firm and calm response is what maintains the flow. The universe reads vibrational coherence, not emotional despair. Therefore, each time you feel the temptation to yield to doubt, breathe and return to the state you created. Remind yourself, money is a reflection, not an independent force. It has not disappeared, it is merely responding to your last command. Sustaining the state is also refusing to speak against what you desire. Words have weight, and every complaint is a signature of delay. When you say, "It's difficult," you reinforce the vibration of difficulty. When you say, "It won't work," you seal a command of blockage. Silence is more powerful than lamentation. If you cannot speak in alignment, be silent. Money hears what you feel, but words amplify the feeling. Use them wisely. The discipline of remaining in the state is a form of reverence for your own word. Whoever changes vibration with every external fluctuation shows the universe that they still don't trust what they have decreed. The one who remains firm even amidst chaos demonstrates mastery. And the universe bows to those who demonstrate mastery. This is the difference between one who desires and one who creates. Desire waits, creation sustains. Imagine the farmer who plants a seed and, the next day, digs up the earth to see if it has sprouted yet. He destroys his own process. So it is with one who commands and then doubts. Faith is not an emotional act, it is a stable posture. It is knowing that the seed has been planted and that the invisible is working even when nothing is seen. When you sustain the state, energy accumulates until the physical world has no choice but to reorganize itself to reflect the new command. So, when it seems that money is gone, do not lament it. Say in silence, "It is moving to return multiplied." When everything seems tight, say, "This is merely the echo of the old state dissolving," and maintain the vibration. You don't need to force the flow, you need not to interrupt it. Money is loyal to the most constant frequency, not the most intense. It does not follow momentary emotion, but sustained vibration. Sustaining the state is proving to yourself that you trust the invisible more than appearances. And when this trust becomes natural, the visible world inevitably bows. Because it is not the truth. It is merely the mirror of what you have decided to be. Money is not your enemy nor your master. It is a reflection of how you see yourself. When you fear it, you give it the power to control your emotions. When you idolize it, you place it on a throne that separates you from yourself. But when you recognize it as a faithful servant, as energy that responds to your vibration, it reorganizes itself. Money obeys consciousness, not circumstance, and the consciousness of abundance is not built in a day, but in every thought, every feeling, and every word you emit about it. That is why, from now on, you must stop asking the universe as if you were a beggar before a distant king. You're not begging for something you don't have. You're calling back what already belongs to you by vibrational right. Money is not a blessing that comes from outside. It is an extension of your own creative force. When you understand this, the game changes completely. You stop chasing and start attracting. You stop reacting and start commanding. Speaking to money is, at its core, speaking to your own consciousness. It is remembering that everything that exists outside is merely an echo of what you have already declared within. Therefore, upon waking, speak to it in silence with authority and serenity. Multiply, circulate freely, return to me amplified, in peace and harmony. And as you say this, feel it, not like one who desires, but like one who decrees. Feeling is the seal of creation. It is what transforms words into reality. Without feeling, phrases are wind. With feeling, they are law. From this moment on, act as one who has already been obeyed. Walk, speak, decide and think like one who has what they commanded. Because that is how the universe understands that the command was real. The person who commands and then doubts cancels their own decree. But the one who commands and rests transmits a vibration of authority so clear that reality has no alternative but to align itself. It's not about denying the world's challenges, but about not letting them dictate the tone of your inner voice. Reality is merely a delayed reflection of what you believed yesterday. If today you speak and vibrate as an owner, tomorrow has no choice but to confirm your word. Consciousness creates first, form merely follows. Money, like everything in the universe, is obedient to whoever takes command. So look within and see, what command have you been sustaining until now? Have you been saying, I don't have, it's lacking, it won't work? Or have you been saying even in silence, I am abundant, it's coming, everything serves me? The words you choose are keys that open or close portals. From today, speak differently. Speak to money as one who awakens something that recognizes it. It doesn't need to be convinced, only reminded. And when you do, don't impose, don't plead, just determine with love. Love is the highest vibration, the one that contains all others. Money multiplies when called to serve a purpose that vibrates in harmony. Command with love and it will move in peace. Say to yourself, everything I need is already on its way because the universe obeys my awakened consciousness. And then be silent. The silence after the command is faith in its purest form. It is in this space that the invisible works. Money does not create power. It reveals the power that already exists within you. Therefore, when you learn to speak to it, you will realize it was never about the money. It was always about the consciousness that generates it. From now on, stop looking outward. Speak to the invisible. And the visible will have no choice but to align, because when the Creator awakens, even gold recognizes them.